All right, so October, November 2006, question 30. And this one was tricky, and which is why it was one of the few questions that the examiner report also commented on. So uh, after I offer my explanation, I will also show you what the examiner report had to say. But first things first, do pause it and try to attempt the question by yourself. Anyhow, so question 30, what does a government need to maintain a balanced budget? And something you should know, so balanced budget is where your tax revenue and your is basically equals to your government expenditure. So technically speaking, your tax revenue was what you were getting, and your government expenditure, what was the government was spending. So both of those things were equal, such that the budget itself was balanced. Um, Now you have to look through the options, and the simplest way to do this was through elimination. So that's what I'll do first. I'll show you why the other three options were wrong. So if you read A, allow automatic stabilizers to work. Automatic stabilizers again would just look at um, either would just act against either the inflationary or deflationary pressure. It would not necessarily lead to a balanced budget. And if you look more, if you want to look at automatic stabilizers um, in a little more depth, so the two, like the two most common ones, you have a progressive um, taxation, you have that, and you have government expenditure on unemployment benefits. Whoops, anyhow. So on unemployment benefits, excuse the bad handwriting. Anyhow, so let's say that your GDP, for example, or your aggregate demand, whatever, that increased. You have an inflationary pressure. What happens is that your tax revenue should increase, because with progressive taxation at higher income levels, you tax more. uh, and your government expenditure on unemployment benefits, however, should decrease, because when you have inflationary pressures, well, then you're moving towards the idea of full employment, right? So there are less people unemployed. So the amount you're spending on unemployment benefits decreases. Clearly, if total revenue is increasing, total tax revenue is increasing, and government spending is decreasing, well, that doesn't lead to a budget, that balanced budget. That leads to this becoming even more but that just basically means tax revenue and government expenditure would move away from each other. They would not be equal, right? So you can cross that out. Now, B was in fact a common option. However, the issue with B was that you might think that keeping tax rates and benefit rates unchanged would help. However, the issue, there are two issues. The first issue is that even if the tax rates and the benefit rates were the same, that does not necessarily work, because these are rates. You have to look at overall tax revenue and government expenditure on benefits. So rates itself doesn't really make this work. And the second thing was how these are unchanged. Just because they're unchanged, what you mean by the fact that they're unchanged means that you haven't changed them from what they were initially, right? Or what they were like when you saw this. So just because you don't change them doesn't mean they were initially operating in such a way that the revenue was equals to the expenditure. They could be unequal initially, and now you haven't changed them, so they're still unequal. So, which is why you can just cross out B. C was the correct answer, so let's just skip over that for now. Let's look at D. Aim to keep output close to the full employment level. Well, no, if you keep output close to the full employment level, then automatic stabilizers do set in. So your progressive taxes, via your progressive taxes, your tax revenue increases, your unemployment benefits expenditure on that goes down. So this basically happens as well, because it hasn't really told us anything else that would happen. So D was a little irrelevant, and even if you just look at it in terms of automatic stabilizers, even then it would just make tax revenue and government expenditure unequal, rather than helping them uh, become the same amount of as each other, which is what you want. For what you want is tax revenue should be equals to government expenditure. So now let's look at So by elimination, you could have said that, yeah, it's C because all three other options are clearly wrong. But let's look at why is it C. Now it says you raise taxes in a slump and lower taxes in a boom. Now let's look at it like this. So a slump is where your GDP or your national income, whatever you want to call it, that goes down. And the idea here is, if you think about it, your government expenditure here should go up because there is more unemployment. Generally, in a slump, in a recession, a lot of people do they get unemployed. So government expenditure on one particular constant that mainly on welfare payments, namely unemployment benefits, that's going to be constant, right? Irrespective of whether you're in a slump or whether you're in a boom. So the I well might not happen in our country, but doesn't not usually does happen in developed countries. So the idea here is, if you have more unemployment, then you're going to be spending more on unemployment benefits because there are just more people that are unemployed, and hence what happens here is then this equation starts to unbalance. So because government expenditure has gone up, what you also want to do, you want to raise taxes so that tax revenue goes up, so that this is equals to one on each, the left hand side of the equation is equal to the right hand side of the equation. That's what you want to do. In a boom, where obviously GDP is high, so your government expenditure decreases as there is less unemployment. Uh, and if you look at your equation, if this goes down, you want tax revenue to go down as well. And you can get that by lowering taxes. Another way, if you want to look at this, is through the other automatic stabilizer, that is uh, progressive taxation. So in a slump, if you look at in a slump, the tax revenue you get from progressive taxes also goes down. So to neutralize that, you definitely do need to increase your tax rates so that you can neutralize this downward effect on tax revenue through progressive taxation. The same thing if you look here through progressive taxation, in a boom, because more people have money, more people have higher incomes, the tax revenue goes up, which is why you really need to decrease or lower tax rates so that you get the final effect of a decrease in tax revenue, such that it overrides any upward pressure that the automatic stabilizer known as progressive taxation would have applied. So hopefully it's clear why it was C. We can now look at the examiner report anyways. So candidates were completely at a loss on question 30. So if you didn't get this, don't feel bad. If tax and benefit rates are kept unchanged, B, therefore allowing automatic stabilizers to operate, A, tax or revenue will automatically decline in a slum and government spending will increase. And if one thing is declining, the other thing is increasing, obviously they won't balance each other out. So it's not a balanced budget. Hence, to maintain a balanced budget, tax rates need to be raised or spending cut. It is clear that candidates have not covered this topic, even though it is explicitly in the syllabus. Yeah, like sounds like a very well, I don't know why they're scolding us. Anyhow, so that was it. Hopefully that helped.